Chapter 12, In the Ruins. In the ruins. A sharp gasp, and Fritha opened her eyes on dark canvas, the tent's roof instantly obscured by that striking face as Solafane appeared unfocused above her, hands on her shoulders and pressing her back into the soft bedding as he soothed,
"Please, Fritha, do not move too suddenly."
She relaxed at his request, the dull pain throbbing all through her skull, her throat parched and sore.
"What happened? I could not catch you this time and you hit your head. Avalar examined the contusion, but you have been unconscious since. Does it pain you?"
"No," she lied,
"I'm just a bit dizzy. What did I miss?"
The drow sat back on his haunches with a sigh.
"Nothing, in all honesty. I brought you from the temple and the others agreed that we should head straight for Saradush to aid the city as we can, though this was not the path that Ivik and Baia wished to walk. They left us a few leagues back, they too heading west back to Sira, while we continued northeast. We are camped now on the Amir's edge."
Fritha was mortified, forgetting her thirst and even the pain as her face burned.
You carried me for the rest of the day."
Solafane seemed amused by her horror.
"You were no burden. Tandith and Bryn took our packs between them, and we walked well past the dusk. Our camp here places us at the edge of the mere, about a league from the main road to the city. With an early start, we should arrive late tomorrow afternoon, if you can walk."
She could hear his smile in the darkness, the warmth of it helping her own.
"I can walk."
An amused sigh, Fritha listening to him rummage on the other side of the tent before turning back to her, his flask in hand, the drow slipping an arm under her shoulders as he helped her take a drink, all his focus seemingly on returning it to his pack as he continued,
"Did you have another dream?" "Yes."
"And?" he pressed, voice muffled as he hauled off his tunic. Fritha sighed and shifted in her blankets, feeling the slight judder through the bedding as he lay down next to her.
"And I don't think my mother was a lady from Ashabenford anymore. You were acting strangely in the temple, as though you could see things I could not, visions." "Memories," she admitted, "I think I was born here." "Here in the mere?" "No, at the temple in the Wealdith, though I think I came here once for a ritual of some sort. When I spoke to Saravik again in my dream he told me that there was a Balspawn born here in Tethur, one chosen by Bal to survive to adulthood and bring about his return."
She glanced to him.
"I think it was supposed to have been me."
Solafane was instantly propped upon an elbow, white hair falling about his bared shoulders, his concerned frown demanding the answer from her. He always looked somehow wilder when his hair was loose.
"And what does such mean for you?"
Fritha shrugged.
"I don't know, nothing really, I suppose. I mean, they're dead now, aren't they, the priestesses who did the choosing? It was probably my mother who decided it was to be me. She was the high priestess and I don't suppose you get to be the head of Bal's temple through charm and diplomacy. Even Saravik believes it is all still open to chance."
The drow shook his head, lying back once more.
"There is that word again, fate stalks you like a prey. And not just me."
Fritha sighed despairingly.
"Oh, why is Mon in Saradush of all places? And Jahara, too, for I can't believe she'd let her go alone." "Well, the obvious reason would be they left Sultanaselar to look for you. But I asked Elsyme to send them to Candlekeep. What brought them south?"
Under the blankets, a hand reached over to cover hers.
"You will know soon enough, Fritha. If the city has not yet fallen,"
she murmured reluctantly. Solafane refused to share her fears.
"Even if it has, they will have survived it. They are strong and resourceful, they have lived through far worse. You will see tomorrow. And then?
She questioned, suddenly desperate to hear him repeat the words. He did not disappoint.
And then, we can leave here and never look back.
Fritha lay still, listening as his breathing eventually softened and sleep claimed him, wishing she could have his confidence in the thing, because she was no longer sure the fates were going to let her go so easily.
Praise and glory be to the gods who saw fit to grant us victory yesterday, the invincible Yogashura unable to withstand the righteous blade of our combined might. Let this triumph stand as a lasting testament to the eternal brotherhood that exists between our two great orders and as proof absolute that when our forces are marshaled in righteous cause, none shall stand before us.
The surrounding men cheered, though Anoman sensed an air of obligation to it, Sir Elquist nodding and raising his hand at the applause, and Anoman felt a surge of intense dislike as he stared up at that smug, self-satisfied face. He left as soon as he could, the assembled knights disbanding about him as Sir Elquist retired to his tent. Anoman shook his head, he could not believe Elquist and the commanders of the Silver Chalice had been right, but what other explanation could be offered? Anoman had told no one about how it had been he who had struck Yogashura that first wounding blow. Had he somehow removed the enchantment? He did not think so, his heart had been filled with fury, not a divine judgment. Even after the giant had fallen, yesterday's battle had raged for another hour or so, a bitter, bloody fight, the armies of Saradush and the orders pinning the brigands in their camp to slaughter all who could not find an escape. Anoman had managed to get through the conflict relatively unscathed. Brianna had taken an arrow to the shoulder early on, not that it had seemed to slow her any from the reports he had heard, the woman a steadfast rock amid the chaos on that great war horse of hers. Even Eric had seen fit to compliment her when they had met later in the infirmary tent, the clerics tending his wounded leg, Simon at his side and laughing wincingly as he had lifted his tunic to show him the dark crescent bruises that covered his chest from where his horse had thrown and then trodden on him. But they were most definitely the fortunate ones. He looked away as he passed the narrow wagon where men were laying gently the shrouded bodies of those who had not been so lucky, the remains being taken back to their families. Together, both orders had lost almost 100 men overall, 34 of them from their own company, and though such fatalities were acceptable to mimic the clerk's phrasing, they weighed on him still. At least they would get a decent burial. Down on the plains, the previous day had been spent sorting the dead on that bloody battlefield, the green broken by the corpses of men and horses alike, and everywhere were lost weapons, broken banners, and other detritus of war. Great throngs had come from Saradush to walk the carnage, some to identify and claim their own, returning with them to the city for private ceremonies, while others were on a less noble task, craven looters picking like crows through the remains of the far braver people who had died to save them, the brigands and those who none had claimed being burnt as one upon great pyres outside the city, air tainted with smoke and the foul reek of charred flesh that even the Kalimvorit's incense could not mask. Imoen had lingered a while at Agwin's pyre, the girl very quiet for the rest of that day as they had helped to tend wounded at the camp infirmaries and temples in the city both. Those without any skill to heal kept busy tearing sheets into dressings and running back and forth with endless supplies of hot water. Anoman had met Melisande but briefly during a visit to the Ilmataran's temple for supplies. The self-proclaimed guardian of the children had apparently been awestruck for the remainder of the battle, unable to believe Yogashura had actually fallen, but she was soon brought around by the work that followed, the woman using her skills to aid the injured, though some things were seemingly beyond repair. That morning had seen a great exodus of Baalspawn from the city, along with many of the caravans who had been trapped by the siege. Melisande had apparently pleaded with many to stay, but those that had survived the siege had seemed to have lost faith in the woman, quickly leaving city for their own destinations. Anoman pulled his mind away from such things, back in that camp once more. He was to be watch commander for the first shift that night, the watch tent his own to use until he was relieved by Sir Codrell at moonrise, and the others had waited there for him. 3 sat and 1 curled on the simple folding chairs within, quiet and reflective, Imoen glancing up as he entered.
"Hey, Anomen,"
she sighed, going back to glumly pulling at a loose thread on the knee of her trousers.
"How were the speeches?"
asked Jaehaera coolly. Anomen could hear her disapproval of such self-congratulatory bluster when the slaughter was but a day past, though Anomen did not voice his own dislike the man, though he did. Sir Elquist was his commander and Anomen would not be so disloyal as to criticize him before others. The druid snorted at his silence. Nothing seemed to tell her all she wished to know anyway, Minsk wisely stepping in before any other comment could be made.
"We were just speaking, young Anomen, of what our plans are to be now."
Anomen sank into the last chair with a sigh, taking up again the greave and cloth which had occupied him before he had been called away, the rich scent of Polish calming his nerves.
"You are sure, then, Fritha was not in the city?"
"Very," affirmed Jaehaera.
"Not only in that we looked for many days, but once trouble came, she would have made herself apparent even if she had been previously avoiding contact." "And why would she do that?"
demanded Imoen.
"She wasn't there, Anomen, she never was. We just have to work out where she is now."
"Who says maybe Candlekeep?"
offered Minsk. Valigar was frowning.
"Forgive me, but Fritha is perfectly capable, and I have no desire to wander from guest to guest looking for her."
"No one is asking you to,"
Imoen rejoined sharply.
"Perhaps we could use some sort of spell to divine her location. Does anyone have anything of hers? Anomen? A letter, a lock of hair, a used hanky? I don't know, she was your sweetheart."
Anomen dipped his face, feeling suddenly empty.
"I have nothing, my lady."
Jaehaera rose with a sigh, back and chair both giving an unwilling creak.
"Melisande wished to speak with us about something this afternoon. She said she would meet us at the city gates."
Valigar and Minsk stood, too, the druid glancing to the still-seated Imoen.
"You are not coming?"
The girl just shook her head, Jaehaera gently ruffling her hair as she passed her, Valigar looking tempted to offer some reassurance of his own, though he paused for only a beat before thinking better of it and followed Minsk and Jaehaera out. Anomen dropped his attention back to his greave, feeling at the instant Imoen's gaze shifted to him.
"I don't know how you can even be bothered with that."
Anomen sighed.
"It still needs to be done, whether Fritha is here or not." "You don't even care where she is,"
the girl accused hotly.
"You're just going to leave with the order and go back to Athkatla like nothing's wrong." "Imoen."
She did not let him finish.
No, I'm sorry, Anomen. It's easy for me, my only real tie in this world is to her. But I shouldn't worry."
Imoen sighed, clearly trying to cheer herself as she straightened in her seat.
"Wherever she is, Solafane is going to be with her, he would not let anything happen to her."
Anomen returned to his work with a renewed briskness.
"No, my lady, I suppose not."
A commotion outside the tent forestalled his brooding though, Anomen throwing the flap back as the young squire reached up to rap upon the pole.
"Squire, what is going on?"
The lad saluted, words tumbling out in a rush.
"Sir, some elves have arrived at the western gateway asking to speak to the general, but we were unsure about allowing them entrance. They have a drow in their number."
Imoen whipped to him, her expression wavering between fear and hope.
"Solafane!"
And she was gone, Anomen yelling orders back to the baffled squire as he leapt after her. The group were assembled just before the opening, a loose gathering of elven scouts, Solafane conspicuous by his very nature, dark skin, and long white hair merely accentuated by his pale grey cloak. And there by his side she was standing, much thinner than he had recalled, her long travelling robe worn over her clothes and blue woven shawl looped about her neck even though the day was mild. But the weary look was still the same, the girl leaning into the drow briefly and looking almost as though she would faint with relief as Imoen barreled from the gates.
Fritha!
And Fritha had not even the breath to voice her name as Imoen caught her in a furious embrace, the elves retreating to a polite distance as the tearful scolding began.
Oh, Fritha, I could bloody strangle you, I was so worried. I'm sorry, Imoen, is Jahara here with you? Is she all right? When I saw the field down there.
She's fine, Imoen assured her kindly, still mopping at her face.
We're all fine, Minsk and Valigar are here, too. They are? Why? Looking for you, of course.
Imoen laughed wetly, the girl turning her beaming smile on the man next to her.
Hey, Solafane, you kept her safe for me then.
She laughed, his confused expression softening slightly as she pulled him into a friendly hug.
Gods, it's good to see you both alive after everything.
Fritha just nodded, the relief she felt was making her light-headed, the days spent at a forced march all catching up with her at once, and she wanted nothing more than to curl up on the grass and sleep beneath the sky. Fritha about to gesture to the gateway and suggest they go inside when her eyes finally found him.
Anomen!
Imoen turned, too, the man hanging back all that while as they had enjoyed their reunion. There had been a time when he would have behaved as Imoen, but it was seemingly past now, his face unreadable as he made a measured approach.
Yeah, I forgot to say, the Order are here as well. I was surprised, too, I thought it was just Silver Chalice out here at first.
A quick glance between their pair, and Imoen had scooped an arm about the drow's elbow and was pulling him after her.
So, Solafane, how've you been?
Anomen watched them go, and it seemed to take a great effort for him to turn again and look at her, his smile slight and nowhere to be seen in his eyes.
Fritha, you are well, I trust.
Fritha could not help a laugh, the statement so far from the truth it seemed farcical.
Yes, yes, as ever. And yourself? I am quite well.
He paused, some hint of the old emotion creeping in as he continued.
I was going to ask for leave to visit Sultanaseller after this campaign. I'm glad to find out you had left before I did, not that it would have been an inconvenience for me.
He added hastily.
Only that I would have been concerned, if you had not. Fritha.
They both whipped back at the shout, Simon marching through the gateway, Eric and a tall, dark-haired lady she did not know following him, the young paladin stalking over to sweep her into a warm embrace.
Oh, Fritha, you had Anomen and the rest of us worried sick. I'm sorry, Simon. Hello Eric and...
Eric stepped forward to make the introductions.
Fritha, this is the Lady Brianna. Please,
the woman smiled, something of the nervous about her as she flashed her a smile.
Brianna is enough, well met, my lady.
Fritha reached forward to clasp briefly the hand she offered.
Fritha, please, I am glad to meet you, Brianna. You are here with the Silver Chalice. Ah, no, I joined the Radiant Heart but a month or so past with hopes for the honor of being knighted. You are in good company then,
Fritha continued, glancing to the man next to her, her first genuine smile pulling at her lips.
Perhaps Sir Simon can give you a few pointers. Congratulations, Simon.
The Ladenite laughed even as he flushed, throwing an arm about her shoulders for another friendly squeeze. Eric's expression remained decidedly neutral.
Indeed, though it is our own Anomen who has spent most time with the lady from when we departed Athkatla. And I have heard you praised in many tales since then,
Brianna added quickly. Frithha smiled.
All lies, I assure you.
The woman looked mildly perturbed.
I cannot believe that, Sir Anomen is quite beyond any falsehood. Indeed.
Agreed Frithha slowly, a glance behind confirming Imoen and Solafane were back and standing with the elves, Imoen already causing a bit of a stir, Cephas and Orville looking scandalized by her mere presence as the girl laughed loudly.
Well, perhaps we should meet with your commander. I know Captain Ferdinand is eager to complete our respective tales and judge the danger to his own city.
Sir Elquist had heard of the elves' appearance by the time they had arrived, benches enough for them all assembled within his tent as Imoen joined Frithha, Solafane, and the elves, the knight's frustrations evident as Anomen was told to await them outside, Imoen soothing his anger with a request to tell the others of their errant leader's return. The meeting was formally born and mercifully brief, the knight commander rather reluctant to believe that it had been their actions many leagues to the south that had dispelled Yagashura's protections, Frithha ending the rapidly escalating disagreement between he and Ferdinand, by bluntly stating he could tell the prelate and the rest of the order whatever he liked, she had only come there to see her friends were unharmed, Imoen snickering appreciatively at her arm. One thing they did all seem to agree on was their mirrored desires to return to their respective homelands as soon as was possible, both Ferdinand and Elquist confessing plans to leave the very next day, and it was on this cordial hope the groups parted. Frithha stepped from the stuffy tent, the air within warmed with too much pointless blustering and she was glad to feel the breeze again, the elves around her all talking about where they would make the night's camp, Tandith extracting promises from she and Solafane to come and take dinner with them one last time. Anomen was waiting just where they had left him, the woman, Brianna, keeping him company in his vigil, and the pair lingered on the edge on the group. Anomen was watching their parting with a curious frown and Frithha realized suddenly she had been speaking the elves' lilting tongue the whole time, they had travelled together so long it came as habit to her now, the girl switching back to her own Kondathan as the elves finally departed and their two approached.
Anomen, and Brianna, too, thank you for waiting.
The man nodded, a frown sent to the tent behind her.
Sir Elquist was satisfied with your report then?
Frithha smiled.
Yes, no doubt you will hear it all soon enough,
she added at Imoen's eager look.
Yet, Anomen, you're never going to believe what these two have been doing.
Anomen's expression said it all, Imoen snorting wildly into her hand and slapping Frithha's shoulder at the unfortunate moment she had just reached up to check her ever-disheveled twist of curls, Frithha hissing as she caught the livid lump that was still hidden beneath. Anomen glanced to her.
Are you well? Fine, just tired, I pulled my own hair.
Imoen laughed kindly at her friend's clumsiness.
Ah, you'll be better for a sleep. Here, take some water,
said Solafane, passing her his flask.
I will have one of the squires bring you something more, if you wish,
offered Anomen,
some tea or perhaps.
Frithha forestalled the inevitable menu with a smile.
Water will be fine, Anomen. Come on,
cried Imoen, blithely linking an arm through hers.
Now that's all out of the way, we need to sort out what we're going to do next. I meant to say,
added Anomen quickly,
I managed to catch the others before they departed and had a squire sent down to the gates in their stead. Melisande will meet you all just outside Southern Palisade, I believe the others are there now. Melisande,
repeated Solafane.
Yep,
chirruped Imoen,
she's the one who brought all the children to Saradush, supposed to know loads about the prophecy. She's all right, a bit wet in a crisis, though. Come on, you can meet her yourself.
They moved barely a pace though, all turned back and looking at the woman they had inadvertently left behind.
My lady, are you not coming?
Brianna's eyes flicked from Fritha to Anomen.
Well, this really isn't a matter for the order, and I promised Varin I would help him with the cooking this evening.
The knight was frowning.
He can surely enlist one of the other squires to help him if he needs it. You are quite welcome to join us.
Brianna glanced again to her, Fritha's friendly nod showing her agreement.
Yes, certainly, we will speak of nothing so private you cannot come, and it will be good to have an outsider's insight.
But the woman would not be persuaded.
Thank you, but I should be getting back to the others. I will no doubt see you tomorrow, Anomen.
A smile and she was gone, Imoen not so concerned enough to let it delay them an instant longer, the girl leading them down to the gateway and the small fire the others had coaxed to life just beyond the encampment's walls, the group glancing up at their arrival.
Fritha!
Cried Jahara, stalking over to clasp her in a fierce embrace.
You are alive, thanks Sylvanus. Surely, you could have waited to see us before going to speak with the knights.
Fritha blinked, it had never even occurred to her.
I'm sorry, I didn't think you would be worried once Anomen had told you I was here.
The druid just tugged, Minsk stepping up to lay two firm hands upon her shoulders.
It matters not, you are back with us now, who says this is all that is important?
Yes, Fritha sighed, surveying them all with a weight to her heart,
back together again. So, what now?
She continued, slumping to sit on the grass as the others sank down about her.
Do you plan to return to Suldanesselar?
Imoen's snort was all the answer she needed, though the girl saw fit to elaborate anyway.
Not likely. I wouldn't go back there on a bet, though to be fair I don't think we could even if we wanted to. We heard about all this.
She waved a hand in the direction of the city down the hill,
at Nalia's wedding, and we came straight back to Suldanesselar to find you gone. At first, we had thought you had eloped.
A frown from Solafane, he clearly did not know that word yet, Fritha would have to explain later.
But the gate guards said you and Solafane had already left and said nothing where you had gone.
Fritha frowned.
Didn't you speak to Elsyme? We could not,
said Jahara.
They would not let us enter the city, said the gates were closed to all but Suldanesselar's citizens until this trouble here had passed.
At her side, Solafane snarled something in his own tongue, Fritha's anger too muted by her utter disbelief.
They wouldn't let you inside? But Elsyme promised me, she swore that if I left peaceably she would let you stay there.
Imoen's outrage was predictably venomous.
That lying cow! So, she did force you out then, I knew it. She must have planned this all from the beginning. But why didn't you let us know where you were going?
Fritha just shrugged, it had all been hopeless from the very start.
Why else, Imoen? To spare you from this. Oh, young Fritha,
sighed Minsk, Jahara shaking her head, while next to her Imoen quirked a wan smile.
Didn't work, did it? No. So why did you all come here? Yes, I know to look for me, but why Saradush?
Valigar glanced briefly to Imoen, as he took up the tale.
When Imoen insisted we return to Suldanesselar and we found their gates now barred, a group of young hunters saw us outside the city. They knew of you. Hunters? I don't know any hunters.
Solafane was frowning.
3 boys. 2 fair, 1 dark. I met them once.
He explained at her bemused look.
They seemed to have seen you before, one looked upon you with favor. Of course,
Fritha laughed wearily, all her fine plans ruined by a lovesick adolescent.
Of course, why not?
On the other side of the fire, Valigar nodded.
As Solifane says, they knew of you and your recent wanderings in the forest, directing us to the ritual grove. I went there a couple of times to look at the carvings, So, someone else was there looking for you, too, this time,
offered Imoen grimly.
Ilisira the Quick she called herself, and she wasn't there to make friends. After she died, the stones sort of woke up and told us about Saradush.
Jahara nodded.
We thought the stones might have spoken similarly to you, and so with little else to go on.
The druid trailed off, they all knew the rest, but Fritha was hardly listening anyway, a sudden frisson of dread traveling her spine.
What day was that? What time?
A wary glance was shared about her, Imoen offering finally,
Afternoon on the second day of Myrtle. And this battle, the giant, Yagashura, fell when?
A nomen frowned.
About mid-morning, why?
Fritha glanced to Solifane and shook her head.
Nothing. Don't give me nothing,
snapped Imoen,
something's wrong. Something's always wrong, Imoen, that's just how it is now.
The girl folded her arms with a disgruntled snort.
Gods, I wish you had eloped, at least then you would be a bit more cheerful.
Fritha ignored her.
So you came here to look for me, and got trapped in the siege?
Yes, confirmed Jahara,
but where have you been? Where hasn't she?
Laughed Imoen, good spirits instantly restored as she related to them the tale of their long and providential trip to the heart of Yagashura's power. Anomen was appalled.
Then Sir Elquist did nothing. Had it not been for your actions, he would have led our entire battalion to their deaths.
Yep, agreed Imoen,
we tried to tell you not to. Agwin.
The girl stopped suddenly, her look empty.
So, we were all working as one, even when we did not know it,
offered Minsk slowly to the silence she had left.
Something like that,
Fritha sighed,
but what happens now? I don't know what plans you may have, but Solifane and I. Are we all here?
Cut in a friendly voice above them, and Fritha turned with the others to see a tall, robed woman arrive on the edge of their group, her face made all the rounder by the dark blue wimple that encircled it. Imoen was quick with the introductions.
Fritha, this is Melissan. She is the one who brought the children here to Saradush. Oh, hello.
The woman nodded her greeting, kneeling to take her place in the circle.
So, the infamous Fritha, we finally meet. Your friends came a long way to find you. Yes, I noticed.
Melissan smiled, ignoring the coolness to her tone.
I must admit to having heard your name before this day, and even before Imoen asked if I knew of your whereabouts. You are Fritha of Candlekeep, are you not? The powerful ballspawn from the western heartlands, who ignores the lure of her blood to fight for goodness.
Imoen laughed.
Calm down, love, she's not Drizzt Do'Urden.
Melissan let narrow, blue eyes travel their circle.
I have heard of you, Fritha, and I can only believe that it is destiny that has brought you all here together now. It is in Tether where the prophecies hold the fate of the children shall be decided, and there are many players in this saga all wanting to turn the portents to their cause, some for good, and others for their own evil ends. My recent discoveries have led me to a cult which has arisen here, a small group of evil ballspawn called the Five.
Fritha sighed deeply, she knew what came next.
Very original, can I guess there are but 3 left now? Yes, 3,
the woman nodded, seemingly bemused by her foresight.
You know of Yogashura's end. And this woman they killed in the Elven Grove was one too, wasn't she? Yes, she was. How did you know that?
Fritha laughed resignedly.
Just a good guess. Well, a guess or not, it is the case. These 5 are some of the most powerful of your kind, and in their desire to resurrect Baal and become demigods themselves, they have banded together to murder all the lesser Baal spawn.
Fritha could not keep the bitterness from her voice, though to be fair, she did not particularly try.
And as we have seen, such desires are inconveniencing enough for the locals, but when these 3 decide they no longer want to share such power, then Tether have a real war on its hands, and the Sword Coast shall be drowned in blood and Baal will rise once more, so saith the ever-helpful Aelando.
Melisande was nodding her sympathy.
I can hear your weariness, Fritha, and after so long another battle is likely the last thing you wish to see, but you must act or the prophecy we all dread will come to pass and Baal will rise again. These remaining members of the 5 are powerful, together they would be more than a match for you all, but if you strike at them separately, Fritha, you must face them, only you have a chance to end this horror before it can truly begin. And what about the rest of us?
Snapped Imoen crossly.
A lot of people died to save Saradush, many of those you had sworn to protect. Fritha didn't just defeat Yogashura alone.
Melisande raised a quizzical eyebrow.
I did not know you defeated Yogashura at all.
Fritha just shrugged.
We didn't, Solafane and I just removed his invulnerability. That was you.
The woman gasped, a sudden gravity to her eyes.
Then, I see now. With destiny so intent upon your group, that you were allies without even knowing it? Yes, I am more sure than ever that you are fated to this task. So who are the remaining 3?
Pressed Jaehaera.
I'm afraid I know of only one, a woman named Sendai. Sendai,
repeated Solafane.
That is a drow name. Well,
smiled Melisande,
it seems you have more clue than I as to her identity, though I do know of one who might know more. His name is Balthazar, he is head of monastic order and, like myself, he has taken an interest in bringing a peaceful ending to this bloody saga. His monastery is located to the south of here, in the desert village of Amkithran. Are you going to come with us?
Asked Imoen. The woman dipped her face in apology, making to rise.
No, I fear I have work still to do down in Saradush. But here is a letter to present at the monastery. That should grant you an audience. And where did you learn all this?
Melisande turned back at Fritha's voice, the rest of the circle suddenly staring up at her.
Sorry. About Sendai and the 5. You've been trapped in a besieged city, did you know all this before?
The pink was rising in Melisande's cheeks.
Well, there have been rumors for a while now. And you did not think to mention any of this to us?
Asked Jaehaera sharply.
Well, it takes time to piece the information together.
The woman snapped, her mellow smile somewhat tighter.
And it did not seem important when we were all trapped within Saradush fighting for our lives.
Fritha nodded slowly.
Well, when you get any more information, even something that seems immaterial, do be sure to let us know.
Melisande stared down at her, and Fritha fancied she saw some hidden anger lingering behind her eyes, when she briskly broke contact to brush down her skirts.
Indeed, well, there are still many wounded within the city who require my aid. I shall perhaps see you in Amkithran in time. I do not trust her,
said Solafane bluntly, as the woman's back retreated down the hill. Fritha sighed.
Everyone has their own agendas in this, but the information she is so happy to impart seems sound enough. So, am I right in thinking we are all going to Amkithran?
A round of the expected nods and affirmations.
Of course, you are not so old yet as to be without a guardian. Minsk and Bu are always ready to fight at your side.
Imoen's hand gave her own a warm squeeze.
You don't have to worry about us, Fritha, we're all in this together, right to then end.
Oh, what a choice of words. Fritha just nodded, looking round at those people, her hopes of that snatched escape mocked in their reassuring smiles.
I suppose that is settled then, we can all set out tomorrow, well, all bar Inomen, of course,
she added with a nod to the knight.
Sir Elquist mentioned the order are to depart tomorrow, you will be back in Athkatla by the summer solstice.
Her heart fluttered at his broken look.
Tomorrow, truly? I knew the commander was eager to get away, well, yes, I suppose we will be then. Right,
Fritha sighed, heaving herself to her feet, that was quite enough misery for one day.
I had best get back to the elves, I promised I would break bread with them one last time. I will see you all tomorrow though, bright and early.
Imoen was frowning, her eyes holding the injured look Fritha had so many times imagined for her.
But, Fritha, we've barely seen you. I'm sorry, Imoen, but I did promise. The elves will leave tomorrow, and you will see more than enough of me in the days to come. Well, I suppose.
Fritha summoned a smile, gods, she hoped that would get easier with practice.
Come now, Imoen, why don't you walk Silafane and I back?
The girl sprang up between them.
Yeah, all right then, come on, Silafane, you can tell me all the gossip.
The elves had made camp on the edge of the palisade, a pool of quiet in that jubilant night. Fritha stood at the paling of wooden stakes, her eyes drawn to the lights of the city far below her, where tonight's celebration and wake together filled the streets with life.
Fritha.
She turned, Silafane standing behind her in the darkness.
Avalor is about to serve the meal. I will be along soon.
Silafane was frowning.
Are you well?
Fritha sighed tiredly, resisting the urge to slump down onto the grass just where she stood.
Yes, no, maybe. Not really, if I'm honest. The others have found me and renewed their insistences that they want nothing more than to die in my company, and I could have done without that. And Inomen looks to have a new lady, even if he hasn't noticed it yet, as I once said to young Davith, there is nothing worse than getting what you want. But it is better this way, much better than it could have been. Because he will return with his order.
Confirmed Silafane. Fritha smiled wanly.
Yes.
The man's frown deepened.
And we will all troop south to Amkithran.
Fritha felt the guilt squirm in her stomach, this Melisande and her five had not just ruined her plans.
You do not have to come, you know.
She offered quietly,
you could return to Athkatla with the order, Inomen would see you right. My place is with you,
the drow stated firmly, his face twisting with a sudden sneer.
That the queen lied to you so cruelly, the surface elves speak of such nobility, but they are closer to their dark cousins than they would be pleased to admit.
Fritha just shrugged.
She acted for her city, I have told similar lies in the past. A part of me wonders now if my plan to leave my friends behind wasn't doomed from the start. Imoen is one of the children, too. This chance meeting with those hunters, the visit to the grove, the way we all seem to end up here, how many coincidences must fall so neatly together before we admit there is a greater force at play.
Cellophane took a step closer, a hand encircling her arm.
That the fates pull at you is one thing, but you do not have to heed them. You do not have to go to this monastery, we can still leave here, if you will it. We can find another place where none of this can reach you. And then what? This burden must be carried. Who will be left to stop the 5 if I leave?
She answered for him.
Imoen, she doesn't deserve that. And you do.
Frithia sighed.
No, but I am ready for it. These last few months. I am ready for what must come. And it's fine, I have accepted it now.
She swallowed past the lump in her throat, breaking contact with him to catch the tears before they fell.
I mean, it's sad, because it was so lovely, those couple of days just imagining escaping it all, but...
Frithia shook her head, her voice wavering away to nothing as 2 hands were suddenly clasped at her shoulders, the drow's look almost wild.
But why must it be you? You said yourself that this prophecy means nothing anymore, the priestesses that chose you are long dead.
She threw his hands off with a frustrated cry. But I have chosen me. I can see something needs to be done and I have the power to change it and, yes, I suppose there are many who could be here instead of me with the ability to do the same, but when it comes to it, I am here, and I am the one who must make the choice, and I have chosen to stay and fight.
And die?
He challenged brutally. Frithia dipped her face in a measure nod.
If that is what it must come to, then yes. I don't want to, but with this 5 wandering about trying to ascend or resurrect Baal, or whatever 100 variations on trouble they are planning, you just know that many innocent people are going to suffer even for their trying. And I know they don't seem very innocent.
She conceded at his scowl.
When they're picking fights with you and calling me names, but people are like that, silly, afraid, and unpleasant when in a mob. But for every Sira there is a Redm store and it is those people I will work to save.
She smiled faintly.
Oh Cellophane, it would not have worked. I have tried to get away before, after all that business in the gate and then after Irenicus, something always pulls me back. My place and my fate are here, and it is time I faced it.
She glanced to him, his face a frowning mask in the half-light, Frithia willing him to understand, because at least then one of them would.
I told you I was on my way out, Cellophane.
He did not try to hide his anger.
And the others, are you going to tell them of this?
Frithia snorted.
What do you think?
He glowered at her, willful, defiant.
And are you not going to forbid me to say anything?
Frithia barked a weary laugh.
We are on the surface now, Cellophane, I'm afraid it is your principles that give the orders here.
The man exhaled furiously and turned away, he would not betray her.
Besides,
she pressed with an optimism she, for one, certainly no longer believed,
it's as you said, nothing is guaranteed, perhaps I can still get through this all in one piece.
Cellophane could not look at her.
Perhaps.
She felt a sudden surge of desperate laughter. What else could she do? The girl clapping him heartily on the back.
What can I say, Cellophane? It's a bugger.
A cough behind them, the pair turning to see Fernil watching them with a frown.
If you plan to eat this meal, Drow, then I suggest you return now.
Cellophane glanced to her, Frithia's reassuring smile there waiting for him.
It's fine, you go, I'll be along in a moment.
But Fernil did not leave with the drow, the man moving to stand next to her at the fence, his eyes on the city below them.
So you plan to travel south with your companions? Yes, and you will return to Sultanaseller,
she offered serenely.
Your mission is completed, after all, I am far from your city and unlikely to live long enough to return.
The elf nodded once.
Indeed, I had no qualms about my task. The queen works for the good of her people, and you and your companions are not included among them.
Frithha shrugged, recalling that room of light and life, and Elisim's earnest promise to her, that her friends would be kept safe. Had she known then it was a lie, or had such deceit crept in afterwards?
I expected more from her at the time, though recent revelations have come as no real surprise to me.
Frithha turned to gaze at the sharp profile next to her.
The only thing I do not understand was why she sent you. You clearly hate me. Could she find no one more willing for the task?
Fernil smiled faintly, and Frithha wondered if she had ever seen him do so before in her presence.
The queen understands that not all of Bal's progeny were gifted equally by the blood. Some have strength, others an affinity for the weave, and for some.
He turned to her.
You, along with many of the more powerful Balspawn, have these traits, but you also have something more, a draw if you will. Put quite simply, people are willing to die for you. What? I mean, they fight for the same cause, but...
Frithha trailed off, her mind drawn back to Saravik and the countless men who had stood in their long path to him, who had spent their lives trying to protect him. They could not all have been compelled to die just for the power promised in his wake.
Your friends traveled leagues just to find you,
the elf continued mildly.
Now they were encouraged in that,
reminded Frithha. Fernil shook his head.
They would have followed regardless eventually. Look then at the people of my troop, if you wish for more evidence. For over a decade Tandath served me loyally, barely a month in your company, and he is willing to go against my wisdom and follow you. Because he believed what he was doing was right. Perhaps.
The elf conceded.
But that is why the queen chose me. She was worried that were anyone sympathetic to your kind given this mission, she would not see any of us again. Suldanisella robbed of troops it could ill afford to lose to your cause.
Frithha nodded, smiling to herself. Elsim really had thought of everything.
But that isn't a problem with you, is it? No,
Fernil agreed, without shame or apology.
The Balspawn are an unnatural plague upon this land, and I can only hope that you all wipe each other out quickly and with the least damage to your surroundings.
He paused, looking for the first time of their acquaintance straight at her face, and Frithha could see the stern resolve there even as he offered,
but for all that, I am sorry that the person you are is tainted by the blood you carry. When your end comes, I pray it is swift and without pain. Thank you.
He nodded once and turned to leave her alone once more. A gnomon drew another mouthful of ale, letting the shouts and laughter outside the tent drift about him unheeded. With news of tomorrow's departure, spirits were high, at least for some. An hour, that was all the gods had seen fit to afford him before she and him were to be parted once more, and every instant of it with the others pressed about her, the drow always at her elbow in silent camaraderie. The knight shook his head, wishing he could feel more jealous, rather than this empty melancholy. Perhaps it was a sign that what had once been between them was now gone. But then he would picture her there, sat in that circle as the woman, Melisande, spoke, the realization dawning on her that there was something more she needed to do, that there would always be something more, until there was nothing of her left, and a gnomon just could not let it go. They had returned to Sir Elquist after the girls and Solafane had left, Jahara informing the man of this five and their plans, though it was merely out of courtesy. The druid did not expect any help and, for his part, Sir Elquist had no desire nor indeed premise to keep the order in Tether any longer. They were, after all, foreign troops, and outstaying their service could be seen as an act of invasion by those who wished it. And so their groups would part again on the morrow, the others leaving to make camp as he returned to the watch tent to finish his shift as he likely should have done straight away, Sir Codrell arriving with the moon to relieve him, and he had been there ever since.
Ah, Anomen,
came a voice before him, Eric pushing aside the canvas to find him sat upon the trampled down grass in amongst the long tables and stacked benches of the mess tent, the glow of his wearlight bright at his feet.
Here you are, Brianna is looking for you. Eric, have you found him?
Came another, Simon's young face appearing next to his friend's and already married with a frown as he stepped inside.
Anomen, it pains me to see you like this. If you want to change anything between you two, then you must go over there and say something to Fritha now, before it is too late. And what exactly?
Anomen sighed, throwing the ale dregs across the grass and making to stand.
They travel south tomorrow, as we go north. He is correct, Simon,
nodded Eric gravely. Simon snorted.
No, he is not. The order go north tomorrow, Anomen, it does not stand you must be with them.
Eric was astounded.
You would have him desert. I would have him follow his heart,
countered the Lathendite.
Anomen, ask Sir Elquist to give you leave, if the cause is good, he will not deny it. You would advise your friend to risk his career as a knight for this. Career?
Repeated Simon incredulously.
Why did we join this order, if not to do good wherever it is needed? Indeed,
agreed Eric,
but a desire to act in righteousness is not the only or even the main reason Anomen wishes to leave with them tomorrow.
Simon looked as close to losing his temper as Anomen had ever seen him.
Look, it's obvious you don't like Fritha, Eric, why don't you let Anomen make his own decision? Why don't you? You said yourself, you favor her, can you not see that just because one may feel something for someone, that it will not necessarily lead him on the correct path? If he loves her, then what more need there be? You are so naive, Simon. No, you are too willing to use your duty as an excuse.
Anomen could not let him finish.
Stop it, both of you. The decision is mine and I will make it.
And before another word could be spoken, Anomen had marched out into the bustling camp. Their group was quiet compared to the revelry the rest of the encampment was enjoying, just a dozen or so figures gathered about a small fire, the occasional laugh rippling out from the low murmur of their talk. Anomen stood in the shadows, trying to find her in the firelight that gave them all a coppery hue.
You lost there, lad.
Anomen whipped back, the elf behind him smiling kindly, his blonde hair golden in his wear-light, what looked to be a carafe of wine in his other hand.
Ah, well, I was looking for Avalar, do you need?
Came that voice, and he turned to find her arrived behind him, her face opening in surprise, before the serene smile was back.
Oh, hello, Anomen, you aren't celebrating with your friends? Fritha, could we talk, please?
She nodded mildly as though she had expected nothing else, the girl sending a friendly smile to the elf as they passed him, Anomen leading them over to the shadow of the tall palisade, the tents about them distant enough to lend some privacy. Beyond the walls, the lights of Saradush were bright below them, the city's glow catching on the trembling gold and amber droplets of her earrings as she finally pulled her gaze away to face him.
So, Anomen,
the girl sighed, no hint of the discomfort he felt to her tone.
What brings you away from the celebrations then? Nothing, merely that we did not really get a chance to talk before.
He swallowed.
You are well, then.
She laughed gently.
Anomen, we've done this bit, I am well and so are you.
Anomen was glad for the darkness, his face suddenly burning as he cleared his throat to continue.
Yes, quite. So you will head out to Amcathran tomorrow, you'll forgive me, but it seemed as though you had other plans before Melisande arrived.
Fritha nodded, eyes drifting back to the city.
That I did, but there was always going to be something, wasn't there?
She turned to him again with that all too cheerful smile.
But, the others will be along to keep an eye on me this time, it will be fine. What plans have you for your return to Athkatla? I understand that Brianna seeks to be knighted in the midsummer ceremonies. She is fortunate to have a friend such as you to help her on her path.
Anomen smiled faintly.
I will aid her all I can, though I do not think she will need it. She was glad to finally meet with you. After so many tales from Simon and Irlina, she had hoped to see you at Nalia's wedding. Yes, it was a shame I had to miss that. What was it like?
Anomen paused to consider the question. Would she hear of the dress? The banquet? The dancing afterwards?
A pleasant occasion. Nalia and Lundolf seem very much in love.
This had clearly been the news she had sought, Fritha's face beaming and lit with a glow to rival Saradush.
Good, I am so pleased for them, I would wish them nothing less. I would I could have been there myself, but I got tired so easily back then. It nearly killed me those first few days traveling with the elves.
She laughed.
I'm surprised poor Solafane didn't have to carry me, but I'm not so bad now.
Anomen felt his stomach tighten at this mention of the drow, his heart still struggling with what it did and did not want to know as he offered,
Solafane seems very loyal to you.
Something about her face darkened, the girl casting a glance back to the small camp she had left.
He is. They all are, for all the good it will do them. But, I am so cynical nowadays, I'm not surprised they ignore me.
She laughed again, it held a brittle quality. Anomen swallowed again, the words sticking in his throat as emotion finally got the better of reason.
I missed you.
Her face wore a painfully wistful smile.
I miss me, too, I was lovely back then. I think on what I did, how I was, and I cannot help but smile. It is like remembering a good friend who you lost long ago. But, such is life, and I do not bear its burdens alone. It must be so frustrating for you all. You and they saved this city as much as Solafane and I did, and then this Melisande turns up and makes out I'm carrying the whole of Toril on my back. Do not falter, young Fritha, or Faerun shall surely crumble.
She snorted, half laugh, half sigh.
What will come, will come. You sound like Simon. Good,
she announced firmly,
for he plays a very sensible fool.
Anomen nodded to himself, his friend's words drifting back to him.
Yes, he does.
Anomen stood, dew from the long grass already creeping up his boots to soak into his trousers as he waited before that great canvas pavilion, the camp about him all bustle as squires dismantled tents and saddled horses, some knights lending a hand. His eyes were drawn involuntarily to Sir Caudrel, and two other men stood talking over their tea as a group of squires packed up the tent at their back. And some, it seemed, were not.
Enter.
Anomen swallowed a cough, his throat already dry, and his discomfort only grew as he stepped inside and found Sir Elquist sat behind his desk, two squires hurriedly packing the maps, collapsible cot, and rest of his belongings into two large chests.
Ah, Sir Anomen, what brings you to me this morning? You are all packed and ready to depart, I hope. Sir, it was that I wished to speak of to you. As I believe you know, my old company are to travel south to Amcathran today, to investigate further this threat posed by the Five, and I should like to ask for leave to travel with them.
Sir Elquist was already frowning.
I had hoped you would see sense and talk yourself around in this, but,
the man sighed, and sternly shook his head,
you cannot just go gallivanting off on your own causes whenever the whim takes you, Anomen. You made an oath when you were knighted to serve your brothers and your god within our number, and yet you have hardly spent a month within our company since you were given the honor. The prelate is a lenient man, perhaps too much so, but others in the order do not see this dereliction in so indulgent a light, your own knight included.
And for a moment, Anoman could see the man behind his eyes, Sir Ryan's austere frown upon him, just as it seemed to be with increasing regularity of late. It made little difference.
But, sir, the threat these ballspawn could pose, just one nearly brought Saradush to ruin.
Yes, dismissed Elquist firmly,
and I have assurances that the Order of the Silver Chalice are to head straight to the temple your companions mentioned, and ensure that none of their number will be left to bring such trouble to these lands again. But what of the others, sir? If Melisande has it right, then 3 still remain, and I feel it is my duty is help end this threat. Your duty is to this order,
Elquist shouted. Anoman felt a reckless surge of defiance.
I would be acting for good. But would it be the best you could be doing? Who are you to say where the order should marshal its forces?
The old knight sent him a stern look.
I cannot stop you, Sir Anoman, but I warn you now, there will be serious ramifications should you choose to abandon your brothers once more. Dismissed.
Anoman was for an instant frozen, struggling with an anger that wanted nothing more than to overturn that table and ask him if he had ever loved anything outside of rules and power and the sound of his own self-righteous voice. What did he know of good? He who would have led them all to their deaths for his own pride. The arm raised, but only in sharp salute, Anoman turning on his heel to march out. Outside, the camp was still bustling about him, oblivious to his frustration and anger both, as he stood before the tent drawing deep cool breaths.
Ah, Anoman, there you are!
And he whipped back to see Sir Caudrel calling across to him.
Squire Hassan is looking for you, your companions are at the gates about to depart.
His friends were assembled before the palisade, the elves grouped next to them just as they had been the day before. Frithia and Solafane were bidding a final farewell to their company, the girl sharing embraces with Tandeth, Avalor, and the scarlet-faced Bryn, the boy stepping aside, and suddenly she was before the aloof Captain Fernil, the elf looking as though he was struggling with himself as he finally conceded to shake the hand she had offered.
Please tell Elsie I understand. Yeah, that she's a two-faced cow.
Imoen bawled from the other group, Jaehaera trying and failing to shush her when the girl noticed him.
Here, Anoman, you came.
Anoman smiled, closing to their company.
Of course, my lady, you are all ready to depart. As ready as we'll ever be.
Imoen trilled.
We've places as guards on a caravan that is heading west to Zasepar, should pay enough to keep us in ale, right Minsk? Indeed,
the Rashami nodded sternly.
Boo says we will all make the way together.
Anoman turned from the judgment that seemed to linger behind his words, the man glad to see more sympathy to the face of the woman next to him.
Have a safe journey, my lady.
Jaehaera smiled and patted his arm, her voice low and lost in the surrounding commotion.
Take heart, Anoman, I have made too many final farewells over the years to put much faith in them. If chance brought us together this time, then why not again?
Anoman could not say much to that, he wished he had her faith.
Well, Anoman,
came that deep, mellow voice, Valigar nodding as he turned to face him,
the order will be returning straight to Athkatla. Yes, we should arrive in a fortnight. Have you any message for your estate? No, they have managed longer than this without me before. I'm sure they'd be glad to know you're alive all the same,
offered Imoen casually. Valigar made no audible reply as back at the elves the last of the goodbyes were concluded. Frithia and Solafane stood watching as the elves turned and moved off down the hill, heading west to make the most direct route back to the Wealdeth. A moment to watch them go and the pair rejoined their company, the rest of the group seeming to retreat further from the palisade as Fritha closed to him, a bright, false smile on that pale face.
Well, Anomen, we are off, then, and it looks as though you won't be here much longer, either,
she added with a nod to the activity behind him.
No,
he murmured hoarsely, not knowing what else to say.
The commander would have us leave within the hour.
She smiled and nodded.
I was glad to see you again this time, Anomen,
Fritha trailed off, but the finality to her tone said all that was needed. They would not meet again, and suddenly her arms were about his neck, her voice at his ear almost breathless, strained by the force of her embrace.
I wish you the best in everything.
She moved to draw back and, for a moment, he resisted, his arms refusing to release her, but he let them drop and she stepped away, still smiling that empty, benign smile.
Goodbye, Anomen.
She turned to walk back to the others and they were gone, his own company setting out not long afterwards, and for the next hour, he watched their silhouettes retreat south across that rippling plain, fading as they became more distant, to be at last lost from view. End of chapter.